There are many top dinosaur lists. The fiercest, the biggest, the most interesting, so on and so forth. So instead of following the same sort of path, I am going to take a radically different direction. I'm asking the ridiculous question, what is the least interesting, the most boring, the dinosaur that will never be on the cover of a children's book or the star of a summer blockbuster? To answer this question, I searched through every dinosaur I could identify using sources such as the Ultimate Dinopedia, ThoughtCo, and Wikipedia. Out of nearly 1,000 dinosaurs, I selected 16 to compete in a single elimination loser-takes-all bracket. Welcome to the worst dinosaur bracket. For the first round, I've distinguished them out by major groupings. So we have the Sauropodomorphs, then the Sauropods, and then because Theropods are kind of a big diverse group, I have large Theropods in one, and then quote-unquote smaller Theropods in the other. On the other side, I have the Thyreophorans. Those are Stegosaurians, Ankylosaurs, etc. I also have the Marginocephalians. Those are Pachycephalosaurs and Saurischians. And then Ornithopods kind of has this big group there, and then other sort of dinosaurs of older lineages or uncertain lineages that didn't really fit anywhere else. And what this does between the two sides is actually split out the two major groupings, the Saurischians, the lizard-hip dinosaurs, from the Ornithischians, the bird-hip dinosaurs. So we'll keep going until the winner emerges. The winner being the loser. Scoring considerations will include an overview of the dinosaur, the fossils found, their discovery history and natural history. Some other things, I'm really going to exclude certain species if they're junior designations or cinnamons. Also, if they have really convoluted uncertain histories, or they're anomium dobium, so unknown name, and also tooth taxon, dinosaurs that are only known by their teeth. And I'm going to try to start with as diverse groupings as I can to really whittle things down. We get off the bat with Sauropodomorphs. Let's start with ones that didn't quite make the worst bracket. We have Huallasaurus. This Sauropodomorph did not make the cut because it's a bit of a wastebasket taxon. That was only one there, so let's get into our two contenders. We have Agrosaurus and Untitled. So Agrosaurus, its name means field lizard, or slightly less name, wide country lizard. It is a Theropods from Europe. Fossils found are a few isolated bones. It lived in the Triassic period, like most Sauropodomorphs. It was pretty small, about 10 feet long, and it was almost interesting in being thought to have been one of the oldest dinosaurs in Australia, but actually not really. It likely just came from England. There was a mix-ups there, so went to be from being very interesting to rather lame. On the other side of it, Untitled, its name means good tibia lizard, which you're already getting off on the wrong foot, or the wrong tibia as it were, if you're named after a piece of your body and how good it is. This is a Rogosaurid from South Africa. Fossils found are also just a few bones. It lived in the Triassic period, and it was larger, about 25 feet long. It was also had a potentially cool backstory, but then turned out to be rather lame. It was thought to have been the same animal as a giant Hareresaurid, which is more carnivorous. The genus Ilwalia, but actually not really. So, with that, we have two dinosaurs, two Sauropodomorphs, that are kind of nondescript, had almost cool backgrounds, but not. And I think between the two of them, I'm going to have to kind of go down the name. Agrosaurus sounds just a little bit cool than something I can hardly pronounce, Euchnimosaurus. So I'm going to give Eucnemosaurus the lose here. So it will move on. So lose means it moves on to vie for the worst dinosaur. Okay, we have sauropods. We see how this is going, so I'll try to speed it up a little bit. These are some ones that weren't considered. Juchiosaurus, Ostrosaurus, and Typiosaurus. These were all discounted because they're a little bit more interesting because their names sounded exotic or more fossil material. In fact, Typiosaurus had an almost complete skull, which is fairly rare for sauropods. So our contenders is Barosaurus and Marginocephalians. Barosaurus' name means Barossa hill lizard, or just hill lizard. It's a titanosaur from Argentina. Fossils found are actually a mostly complete skeleton and other skeletons. Lived in the late Cretaceous, 60 feet long estimated. It was really a little-known generic sauropod from part of the world where there's a lot of sauropods, namely Argentina. Now on the other side, Marginocephalians, its name means Marlagu lizard. It's another titanosaur from Argentina. Fossils found are tails, vertebrae, ribs, limb bones. Mid-Cretaceous, 100 feet long, so larger. These measures are based on better estimations of a close relative's Ryangosaurus. Now, it has the same problems as Barosaurus. It's a little non-generic sauropod. But given that it's quite a bit larger, I'm going to give Barosaurus the lose here, the L here. On to big theropods. Ones I will not consider: Cyzangosaurus, Zangiovenator, and Markia and Apsolion, either because they had convoluted histories, they're Nobiodubiums, or they're just tooth taxons. So I will disconsider all of those. The ones I'll consider is Indosaurus and Rapator. Indosaurus is named to an India lizard. Is an abelosaurid from India. Fossils found as a partial skull. It lived in the late Cretaceous, about 36 feet long. Now the holotype was lost, and it had may have had horns like other abelosaurids like Carnotaurus, but the evidence was lost because of the holotype, so I depicted it here without a horn because that sounded more boring. It really, when it comes to abelosaurids, this Indosaurus sort of seems like a consolation prize Majungasaurus. Now, on the other end of the competition, we have Rapator. Its name means violator. It's a Megaraptoran from Australia. Fossils found is really just a single left-hand bone, so not a lot to go on. It lived in, I believe, the Cretaceous. It's about 30 feet long. And now the thing about its name, it sounds like kind of like raptor, but wrong. And in fact, uncomfortably wrong. Its name is not actually really found in Latin, except very obscurely. It could be even a misspelling. So it really sounds like this dinosaur was like, hey, I got a name for this thing. Let's call it Raptor, but spell it wrong. So with that, and given that abelosaurids are just really cool, even if they are the lame ones, I'm going to have to give Rapator the L. On bladed feet to the small theropods. I will not consider Kangsagnathius because it was a rather boring raptor, but the first dinosaur to be found from Tajikistan, so that's cool. I won't consider Kuulsanosaurus. It's a boring Alversasauridae, but alvas were all weird, so that's kind of interesting. And then I won't consider Peronnectrodon because it was a tooth taxon. So the two I will consider is Urbacodon and Yaverlandia. Now, Urbacodon's name means Urbac tooth. It's a troodontid from Uzbekistan. Fossils found is just dentary with teeth. It lived in the late Cretaceous period. It's about 3 feet long, very small. So this is a boring troodontid with a really boring name. Its actually name is an acronym of scientists who discovered it. So Urbaco, Uzbek, Russian, British, American, and Canadian. So that's about as boring of a name as you can get. And then on the other end, we have Yaverlandia, which means Yaverland, that is Yaverland Point 1. So it's a Maniraptoran from England. specifically the Isle of Wight. Fossils found is a partial skull. It lived in the early Cretaceous, about, again, 3 feet long. It's a boring raptor with a boring name, and actually no one could really figure out what it was for a while. It was marked as an iguanodid or a pachycephalosaurid, and there's undescribed additional remains. So the researchers couldn't even be bothered to look more into it. So with all that going for it, it narrowly beats out Urbicodon to get the L. Okay, we'll shift over to the other side of the bracket with the Thyreophorans. So I won't look at Regnosaurus because it may be a Nobiodumium, and it's also more interesting on the smaller side. I won't do Shanxia because at least it was an ankylosaur and had a tail club. I won't do Zhongguanosaurus or Zhejangosaurus. Sorry if I butchered those. Those are both likely Nomondobiums. So there is Lexoviasaurus and Niobrarasaurus. Lexoviasaurus, his name means Luxovian lizard, is a stegosaur from Europe. Fossils found are pieces of armor and limbs. It lives in the middle to late Jurassic period, about 20 feet long, and described as a general stegosaurian build. So, nothing special about it at all. Niobrarasaurus means Niobrara lizard. It's a nodosaur from North America, specifically Kansas. Fossils found are a crushed skull, vertebrae, and other bones. It lived in the late Cretaceous period, and it's about 16 feet long, and it has no club tail, just as nodosaurids do. But given the go between the two, I'm going to have to give the L to Lexoviasaurus, the stock photo stegosaurid. Okay, we have the Marginocephalians. I'm not going to look at Phryganocephaly because it may be a Nomondubium, not Ojoceratops because it might be a junior specimen of Triceratops or an ancestor. Same with Vegaceratops, it might be a junior specimen of Chasmosaurus. Agioceratops because it's a Nomondubium, and then for the same reason, Coceratops. So on one side I have Texacephaly, and on the other, Unescoceratops. Texacephaly, its name means Texas head, is a pachycephalosaurid from Texas. Fossils are partial skulls. Lived in the late Cretaceous and might have been about 7 feet long. This estimate is based on better measurements from a related genus, Suecia. There was actually the second specimen in this was initially tossed aside because they thought its skull was a rock, so it's hard to see the appeal of this dinosaur charismatically if your head gets thrown away for being mistaken with a rock. On the other side, we have Unescoceratops. His name means UNESCO's horned face. It's a Leptocertopsian from Canada, specifically Alberta. Fossils found as a partial dentary. It lived in the late Cretaceous, about 3 to 6 feet long, and one of its distinguishing features, apparently it's the roundest teeth of all Leptocertopses, which is not a very interesting defining feature. And Leptocertopses were small and hornless, so think Protoceratops, but a different clade. So with all that going for it, Unescoceratops, a very boring name, small, uninteresting Certopsian, gets the L. We have Ornithopods. Some things I won't do. Beryllium. Its name means heavy ilium, which is kind of funny. Planyxocoxia is at least a little more is known about it than the ones I chose. Same with Levnosovia. It's boring, but it has a slightly better name than the others, and the same thing for Hortesaurus. Yeah, the Ornithopods got pretty boring here. On one end, we have Napiasaurus, another Huallasaurus. Napiasaurus means Napa Basin lizard. It's a guanodontid from China. Fossils found are the right ilium and ischium. It lived in the early Cretaceous period, has an unknown size estimate, so let's just say about 20 feet. It's a very boring iguanodid with almost no information. Facing up against it, Huallasaurus name means duck lizard. So it's a hadrosaur. aka a duck-billed dinosaur from Argentina, the fossils found are several partial skeletons. But despite having better fossil records and living in the late Cretaceous, it's 28 feet long. It's very boring. Hadrosaur with a worse name. I mean, come on, duck lizard? That seems like the most half-hearted naming of any dinosaur ever. And its name was actually used as a synonym for another genus, Carnosaurus, for a long time before it became its own distinct genus. So it only recently could even be considered a separate genus of dinosaur. That considered, I'm going to give Huallasaurus the L. Because, I mean, even though Napiasaurus is boring, it's a guantidid, so it has probably had a thumb spike, so that's something for it. Alright, our last category, the other. A couple that I'm not going to do is Walkeria, it's a nomen dubium, and then Dinosaurus, because it might be just a chimera, a combination of different species of bones that were discovered together. So the two I'm looking at is Abrictosaurus and Echinodon. Abrictosaurus, his name means awake lizard. These are heterodontosaurid from Africa. Fossils found are skeleton and skull. Lived in the early Jurassic, about 4 feet long, so a small dinosaur. It might have been one of the most basal heterodontosaurids. Now, heterodontosaurids are known for having their interesting canine-like tusks. Echinodon, his name means spiny tooth, is another heterodontosaurid from Europe. Its fossils found as a very incomplete skeleton, lived in the early Cretaceous, and about 1 feet long. It might have actually been one of the smallest non-avian dinosaurs. So between the two, heterodontosaurids are actually kind of interesting, but these are the least interesting of the grab bag of other eclectic dinosaurs, and I have to give it to Abrictosaurus because it's not one of the smallest dinosaurs, even though it is small. So it's like the uninteresting kind of small. Okay, we made it through the first set of brackets. Let's get to the quarterfinals. With the Sauropods / morphs, Barosaurus on one end and Ichneumonisaurus on the other. There we go. We're facing up against them. And I have to say, Sauropodomorphs are always a little bit more interesting, sort of the ancestors of both Theropods and Sauropods, so it looks like them mashed together, long neck things on 2 legs. So I always think Sauropodomorphs are a little more interesting than Sauropods. I'm going to have to give it to Barosaurus L. On to Theropods. You have Erlandia, the little guy over here, against Rapator on the other end. And gonna have to give it to Rapator because its name still seems awkward, and Erlandia is starting to really grow on me. With the armored dinosaurs, Luxovasaurus and Unticeratops on the other end. Okay. Well, despite Luxosaurus being a stock Stegosaurid, it's still a Stegosaurid, which is more interesting than a knockoff Protoceratops with a unoriginal name, so I'm going to have to give it to Nescoceratops. The Theropods / other, Huallasaurus on one end and Brachiosaurus on the other. I have to say this really isn't much of a competition. Huallasaurus is much less interesting, so it takes the L. Semi-finals. Here we come. With the Saurischians, we have Barosaurus and Rapator. And really, this competition isn't even close. You're talking about a theropod or a sauropod. Man, the sauropods are really hard to parse out, which are the most boring. I had to sift through like 40 different ones that I initially classified as low, so Barosaurus not even close. Rapator, weird, unpleasant, but not the worst. With the Ornithischians, we have Huallasaurus and Nescoceratops. This is a little bit closer, but even with Nesco being uninteresting, I've got to say the bland, stock Hadrosaur with a terrible name, almost like an awkward name, like an insult name. Oh, hey, duck lizard, how's it going? It's got to get the L for me. With that, we've made it to the finals. We will discover in just a few moments which is the worst dinosaur. I could find. So, Barosaurus and Huallasaurus matching up here. And this is a really close one. They're both really generic, boring, not a lot known about them, representatives of the Sauropods and the Ornithopods. And it really has to, I think, come down to the name. Barosaurus hill lizard, or Barosaura hill lizard, is not really interesting, but it's got to be more than duck lizard. So I'm going to have to give it to Huallasaurus, our champion, or loser, as you would say, of this bracket. The worst dinosaur that I could find. Well then, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me. Brace yourselves for awesomes and never stop digging for dinosaurs. So maybe we could figure out more about dinosaurs and discover more boring dinosaurs out there. Thanks and good night.